Aloha, welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking. My name is Lonnie Taylor, and I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer. I'll be your host tonight. Tonight, we'll be continuing our trip around the Mediterranean with a stop in Morocco, a country in Northern Africa. You'll notice the flavors start to change tonight as we make slow cooker Moroccan chicken tagine. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, Uala Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and AARP Hawaii, welcome. For those of you who are new or who may be unfamiliar with AARP Hawaii, we are a membership organization, but what we do organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can build or maintain a healthy lifestyle. We'll quickly go over some of the Zoom controls. If you hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen, the Zoom controls will appear. These may be at the top of the screen if you're using an iPad or a tablet. Everybody is currently on mute. We will be using the Q&A button for your comments, questions you may want to ask Chef Swift tonight. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. The chat button will be used for comments to participants, panelists, and for any technical assistance you may require. Alice Swift, Dave DeWitt, and Jackie Boland are standing by to help. We recommend that you select speaker side by side rather than gallery for this presentation. The upper right side of your screen, click View and select Speaker. Finally, we have added closed captioning to this presentation. If this is a distraction, you can turn this off on your end by clicking the CC Live Transcript button in the lower right side of your screen and clicking on Hide Subtitle. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. Over to you, Chef.
Thank you, Lonnie. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
I never know. We're making it up as we go here. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight as we do continue the Mediterranean influenced dishes that we've been doing for the last month. This one's a little bit different in terms of the spice blend, and we'll talk about that as we get going. So there's seems to be a lot. I don't know. I'm looking at my station here, but we'll get it done. We'll move quickly and encompass everything into the class. So there's kind of a couple different elements to what we're doing tonight. One is the chicken dish itself, and it's kind of done in stages, and it's using the braising method, which we've all done before or seen, certainly repeated a number of times over the course of the class and the series that we've done. We've also got a side dish, which is couscous. Some of you may have made this before. It's one of the easiest and quickest starch alternatives. It's made with durum semolina. It's almost like a pre-cooked pasta. Super easy, and we'll work on that, and then make roasted vegetables and other ingredients that will go into that. That will be sort of the side. That can actually stand alone as a main course or served hot or cold as a salad. Lots of different versatile things that we can do with that particular dish. And then the chicken is the focus and the main ingredient traditionally for this. I did note in the recipe, we're using lemon zest tonight. Northern Africa and Moroccan cuisine in particular, a lot of those cuisines in that region tend to use preserved lemon, which I didn't make. It takes a couple weeks to get them done. You basically are taking a lemon, cutting it 3/4 of the way through 2 times, and then you cover it with salt. You let it cure in its own juice, lemon juice and salt, and then you just kind of turn the jar. It's a really interesting process. We don't use it a lot here, so I just went with the fresh lemon zest, and we can put juice in at the end. But if you're looking to do something that's ultra authentic, you can find recipes online that are pretty straightforward, not complicated. It's just a time issue really. And then of course you need an outlet for those products in your cooking. So the first part here, this is actually all of the different elements for the chicken tagine. And there's some spice blends that you can buy, tagine spice blends. A lot of them have like a lemon zest in them. So if you look online for that spice blend, you can find it probably even here in the supermarket. We're creating our own. But if you don't want to buy all of the spices that go into it, you can find that at your supermarket, certainly online to be ordered. So it is a dish, a spice blend, but it's also a vessel for cooking. And you may have seen them before. They're sort of look like a volcano. You lift it up and you do the cooking inside. You place the lid on top. It has a puka in the center and allows it to allow steam to escape in the cooking process. I looked around for one, but I didn't find one handily. I didn't look too hard, but about 2 or 3 different stores I went to. So tonight we're just using the cast iron Dutch oven, the enamel coated one that we use pretty regularly here. So it's pretty cool that you can find those different vessels. And I thought about trying to see if there was one in the ceramics department, but they're not doing a lot of lab work right now. But those can be made out of, or they're made of clay, and anyone who cooks with a clay pot notices that it does impart a little bit of flavor, which is great. So this is heating up right now, and it should be ready. And then I've got my chicken, and here I've got a couple thighs, and I just took a chicken apart today. So I decided to use the breast as well. The bone has been removed just to make it a little quicker for the process tonight, because we're always in a little bit limited time window. If you wanted the bone in there or the legs, you could actually do this with any part of the chicken, no problem. So I'm going to just season this a little bit before I throw it skin side down. And I'm leaving the skin on just because that's traditional. If you're trying not to eat the chicken skin to reduce the fat content in your diet, then you could just easily remove that. Maybe a light coating of flour would help as well to keep it from sticking, but certainly a little sprinkle of Hawaiian salt and a little pepper will help prevent it from sticking. So the pans should be nice and hot, I think. Don't want to burn it. It might get a little bit loud, but we're going to add the olive oil. Let that heat up for a second. And just make sure that it's nice and hot. And then we'll start the chicken. I got to brown that first and then turn to the vegetables. So it's sort of done in stages. We've got the chicken that'll be cooking. We'll move to the vegetables. This tray will go in after the chicken is cooked. I'll remove it, set it aside just to cook the vegetables, and then put together the spice blend. And then these ingredients will go in last, and the chicken goes back in, and then we'll let it simmer. Then we can turn to the couscous and bang that. Sound like fun? Hopefully. All right, this is nice and hot now. And you can feel free, Lonnie, if you have any questions, fire away.
Sure. Okay, I do have a question. Can I substitute the honey for Splenda? Because some individuals are diabetic, and can I substitute the chickpeas for pinto beans? This is from Cheryl Ann.
Great question. You can substitute anything, I think. And that's what like one of our keys is here, is trying to like recognize, and I left the honey in this recipe. I have raisins, so there's certain things that you may not want in your diet, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So if there's a substitution that makes sense to you, absolutely go for that. I'm going to cover this just so I can hear better. Normally I wouldn't do that because that creates a little bit of steam inside, which isn't going to hurt it, but it's not the ideal when it comes to browning. If you're trying to brown something up, normally you would try to leave it open and allow that steam to escape rather than collect. And we'll see at the top of the lid, even just that, doing that for a minute, I'm already got condensation dripping off the lid. So that then drips back into the fat, it splatters more and creates a problem. So I'll just wipe it every so often. Okay. And feel free, Lonnie, if you got other questions. That was a great one.
Okay. Ingrid, she has a question. Could dried lemon peel from a crack seed store work as a substitute for preserved lemon?
It would. anything like that. And you can do a quick cooking of lemon rind yourself at home, but you could use that. It's not going to be the exact same because it has the salt in it, slightly different in texture. But I mean, for what we're talking about, I think it's close enough to where that would work fine. You might want to rehydrate it a little bit before you throw it in, because otherwise it might just soak up the sauce, whereas you want it to impart the flavor of the rind. So yeah, crack seed store, you can find that. Maybe even a lemon drop, a gum drop. Anything to give it the lemon would be good.
Oh.
I'm going to remove this, wipe that moisture again. And now we've got the onions I already cut. I've got the garlic chopped. I've got the olives. The recipe I wrote calls for slicing them, but these have these nice little pickled garlic cloves inside. And I want to leave those. I don't want to split that. I want to leave it so when you eat the whole olive, you get the pop of the pickled garlic inside. And then the carrot, I just scrubbed these. I wrote peel on the recipe, and you can certainly peel your carrots. It depends on the dishes that you're making, but for me, when I tend to do like rustic style stuff, I like to leave the peel on. I just scrub it really good and it works fine.
Chef, you know, the olives, Lori wants to know, are they salty? And is there any substitute if they are salty?
There are so many kinds of olives out there, and they're not salty to me. These ones are from Trader Joe's. They were a gift to Dale Thomas. You may remember Dale Thomas did some cooking classes for us, meat cutting, summer ago. But there's a lot of different kinds. And what I would say, if you find an olive that is too salty for your taste, just simply put it in, drain the juice, put it in some water, and let it sit for an hour or two, even overnight, and it'll pull some of the saltiness out of it. So there's not really any substitute for olives that I can think of. But there's a lot that are out there that vary in flavor, and plenty that don't have a lot of salt. And I think you can see, maybe I'm trying to flip this over a little bit. We're getting some good color here. We're looking for that nice browning of the chicken. It's important, nice and hot. That keep going, bring it all the way up. And then you can see, I mean, for me, there's only a few dishes where I tend to keep my chunked vegetables a little bit larger. This is one, or braises like stews and things like this. I think it lends itself perfectly to have a little bit larger piece. More often than not, I try to get it so that I'm cutting my product so that if you have a bite of the dish, you can get a little bit of each thing in one bite. But clearly, with large carrots like this cut, you would be able to get carrot and onion and chicken. But I want to be able to pick up just that carrot, taste it, and get the flavor of all of the other items that are in here as well. So that will also help speed the cooking process. That little bit of moisture trapped inside and the lid on it, it pulls the heat in rather than it escaping. So that will help. So I'll just have to be ready to take the chicken out and put it on a tray. And then we'll turn to the vegetables. So these are all ready to go. This will be what goes in first as soon as I'm done cooking the chicken. And we may end up stewing this. The breast part was a little bit thick. We may end up letting it go only about halfway, 3/4, and taking it out because of the time frame. But we'll definitely, when we put it back in there and let it simmer, make sure that we cook the chicken all the way through. So this is not one of the ones you want it to be medium rare. You want to stew it low and slow once you get going, and all those flavors will blend, and you make sure that you cook the chicken all the way through. Look at that.
Anne has a comment about she made preserved lemons. How long can I keep them in the refrigerator?
Oh gosh, for months. We don't, well, last time I used them, they don't stick around that long. So they are preserved. So I would take a look online, honestly. I think you may be able to even keep them longer than that if they're done correctly, because they're preserved. You just have to be careful if you're taking it out and dipping in with things to pull some lemon out to utilize that you don't get any contaminants inside, and then put a lid back on and put it in a refrigerator. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face sometimes is cross contamination. So I would say a few months at least, and I think it might even be longer than that. I would double check. Depends on how they're made and how preserved, what the salt ratio is in there as well. But yeah, great question. Okay, this is looking good. All right, let's get close. So let's look at the spices that we have here. This is similar to what we've done. Some of these spices we've used already over the course of the Mediterranean class. Paprika was a pretty standard spice through a lot of the different blends that we created through South America. Now we're moving into the Med and you're still seeing it there. So dried peppers and chilies ground up is kind of a staple across actually the world, really. We've got some sea salt. We've got ground cumin, which we've used before, garlic powder, which is pretty standard across the board. Here's where we start to differentiate a little bit. This has got some of what I would call sort of your maybe traditionally sweet item spices. So cinnamon is in there. Coriander and cardamom we've been using before as well, but that cinnamon really brings that out. And then the last one is the allspice there. So with those mixed together, it's almost like a Christmassy sort of aroma that you get when all of these spices come together. So these are the items that are on the plate here. I ground up the cardamom and the cumin myself, or the coriander, and the others I had ground already. So I just used that spice grinder that we used previously. You can do it electronically, or you can do it via a mortar and pestle, which I have a few back here. I actually tried it, but I was making a mess and I was in a hurry, so I didn't have time to finish it that route. But either way works fine.
I have a viewer that wants to know the recipe. Is it for 4 servings or for 2?
I don't have to put that in front of me. Usually I try to do 4, but it should say on there. I'm looking at the, yeah, 4. There's 4 pieces of chicken. But again, keep in mind that portion size is the big thing. It sort of depends on how big a portion you're eating. I tend to look at proteins in the ballpark of, 4 ounces, maybe 6 ounces. It sort of depends. But this should serve 4 people a nice light meal. Okay, so this is nice and hot still, and I can then come in and add the onions, the carrots, the garlic. And I'm going to hold off for a second on the olives because those really just need to be heated up. I can smell the chicken. It smells great. And you may have noticed that in the bottom you had all that beautiful fond. So a little bit of the fat from the chicken skin came off, which is what we're going to use to thicken with this roux, or to make a roux with this little bit of flour. But we want all that flavor to come through. So we'll give this a second to cook, and then I'm going to turn over here to the couscous. And you can buy it in the store. Times was out last night, so I had to run to Safeway to pick it up. And there's 2 different kinds traditionally. It's Near East brand. They don't plug brands per se, but they seem to be like the only ones that make it. And it's not always by the rice. It's usually by like the quinoa and the wild rice blends and the specialties type stuff. Not expensive, a couple dollars a box. And I've got the regular couscous, and this is a roasted garlic and olive oil. And this one's pearl couscous, just means it's a little bit larger. Like, again, like it's almost like a pasta in a way. So that one takes a little bit longer to cook. This is more the quick and instant one. So this is the one we're going with. And what I love about couscous is it's so fast and easy. So there's always a spice pack in there. And it's got 1 1/4 cups of water. And I'm going to add the spice blend. I just need that to come up to a boil. And once that comes to a boil, I dump in the couscous, I stir it around, and I shut it off, put a lid on. Give it 5 minutes, and it's done. That's all it takes. You're sort of like rehydrating. It's almost like minute rice. I'm sure no one's eaten minute rice here in Hawaii. Probably not too popular, but I grew up eating it. They make a nice brown rice, but some of the convenience products that are really fast are actually really good. So you can see this one came up to a boil, or I hope you can see. I want to spill this. So I'm going to just shut it off. Take the lid off. Now it calls for a little bit of fat, either butter, olive oil, margarine, or something. I'm going to use olive oil. Put in a little bit. And that just gives some richness to it. You can eliminate that if you want, and you don't have to use that per se, but it is does give that richness that we're, at least in this case, looking for. And I stir it around just to make sure that everything's mixed. A spice blend mixed in fine because it had a boiling effect taking place. So then I just put the lid back on it and it's good to go. So it takes
Chef,
Yeah.
I have a number of requests from Laurie and Ingrid and Natalie. If you can hold up your recipe for the spice blend.
Sure. Bada bing, bada bang. Let me put it right here. If that works. Can you read that? Hopefully.
Dan, maybe I could send it out afterward if it wasn't in the recipe.
Okay. It was in the recipe.
Oh, it was in the recipe.
Yeah.
Okay, so ladies, if you didn't get the recipe, I can actually post that again.
Okay, so we've got this going. Now the veggies are cooking. And we've got what's left here. Let me curve this around. Is our flour. And this is, like I said, this is what will kind of tighten it up and make gravy. So traditionally in Western cooking, what I do is make my roux separately, or a slurry. That's what we do a lot of times in Hawaii too, whether it's cornstarch or flour, but we'll mix it with water. This particular recipe calls for making of a roux, which means that we're just mixing it in the pot with the fat that exists from the olive oil and that little bit of chicken fat. So that'll absorb some of that fat, and then when we go to add our liquids and such, it will thicken it up. So I'm going to put the chicken back in. Well, I'll put the spices first just to make it easier, and I'm going to stir them up in here. I was going to mix them in a nice bowl for you, but I forgot to grab a bowl. So just dumping all of these in. And this is a measurement that we have here on the recipe. And paprika is the leading spice in that. And remember, because we're going to be adding liquid, all of these spices will blend up just fine. Now I can go with the chicken back inside. All that juice that was coming off the chicken is on the tray, and I wanted to make sure I save that. And that goes inside as well. Okay. And then we have the stock. And this stock might look a little bit weird to you. It looks like it's got a bit of a red hue to it. It's because earlier in the salad, I didn't have raisins. I used some craisins. So I had some dried cranberries, which is just as good for what we're doing here. And I always kind of try to steep them a little bit. Put a little hot water in your raisins before you use them in a recipe. Sometimes they sit in the store or they sit around in your pantry and they dry out a little bit. So what you want to do is add a little bit of hot water, just let it sit. So that extra water that was on there, I poured into the stock. I didn't want to waste it. And the flavor would be great if you're getting a little bit of cranberry crossover flavor into this. Perfect. Got it? That Alice's hand. You can see her beautiful nails. She just did her nails. She can put them up for it. There, right there. So what I have left is the honey, the lemon zest, and the cilantro. So the olives can go in now. I'm going to put those in. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the chopped cilantro. I love cilantro, so for me, the more the better, but everyone's a little bit different. I had pulled out a chili. If you want it spicy or hot, of course, anytime you're making any dish and you want to add heat to it, it's up to you. So if you wanted a little bit of heat in here, you could simply just slice a chili and throw it in there. And then if you say you want to cut back on the honey and the sweetness, you don't need to necessarily put it all in. I'll add about 3/4 of that. And then we'll call it good.
So one of the viewers wants to know, what kind of paprika should one use? Smoked Hungarian, hot rather than sweet?
Yeah, what we have is Hungarian here currently. I think any of them would work fine. I'm not going to say that it doesn't make a difference. Probably does to some people. I like almost every paprika I've ever tried, to be honest. And I know that there are some that are a little bit more expensive and a little more sought after, the smoked ones. But we went through a series of uses and styles with the Latin American classes, and all of them tasted great to me. So I would just recommend, getting what you have a preference for and using that as your paprika straight across the board. The one thing that I did do that's a little different now is the Aleppo pepper. I think I mentioned it and showed it to you guys in the last couple classes or in a couple of them. And, it was like $10 for a bottle. It's not cheap, but it's from Aleppo, Syria. And it's a little bit hot. They're a little bit larger granules. So it's like a paprika, but just a little bit bigger. And I've really grown to love that. Actually, I put it on some steak for a class that we had today, some roasted ribeye steak. So kind of up to you. Just, go with what you like and what you can afford.
So Dan and Lonnie, this is Jackie. Sorry to interrupt. It
Yeah.
looks like the spice blend was actually not included in the recipe. So we'll send that out to everybody afterwards. So I apologize, folks. I just reposted the recipe, but then I took a look at it and there's no spice blend in it. So we'll send that out after the program.
No, it's on the second page of the document that I sent. So you should have it, but I can send it to you. No problem. Now, what you can do here is you just remove the lid and it's absorbed all of that liquid. And what we do is just take a fork and we lightly, kind of almost like the way we handle our rice after it's cooked. We scrape it and it just fluffs it up a little bit. Right down to the bottom slowly. You don't want to be rough with it or anything, but it can hold up to it. We're just being gentle. This is where we add the extra love. By just gently fluffing it up. And as I said earlier, this could be a cold salad, a cold dish as well, especially with these ingredients. I think it would be awesome. So there I've got it all sort of broken up, fluffed up, nice and light. And then I've got my ingredients here. So I did a roasted vegetable combination. We've done a dish with a little bit of curry spice in the past where it's roasted at high heat, where we almost charred it or just short of char because we don't want burnt things necessarily. And this has carrots, snow peas, peppers, yellow and red peppers. That is. So I'm going to put those in. I mix those with a little bit of olive oil and the curry spice that's in the recipe. And I got some chickpeas put in there. And like I said earlier, if you don't want to use those, you can substitute something else. Feel free. A little bit of lemon zest. Where's my zester? Right here. And you can put in some lemon juice as well at the end.
Janice wants to know, can you use dried cherries or are they too sweet?
I think you can. They're a little big. You might want to chop them up. That might be overpowering if you get a bite of just straight up dried cherry. But I think they're delicious. And yeah, absolutely. I would say you could do that. And these, like I said, just a little bit of the cranberries. Recipe calls for raisins. They're really popular. You can use dates. You can use anything that might be sort of that sweet dried fruit. Make it Hawaiian style. Do papaya, dried papaya, or any of our tropical fruits that we use. That would be delicious in here. You could really make a nice Hawaiian version of what this salad is. And then last but not least is a little cilantro and some mint.
Carla wants to know, what can be used instead of cilantro?
Instead of cilantro, you could use parsley. I actually had a little extra parsley earlier from my class today. I was going to throw it in. And I'll throw some in here. And we're checking on this. This is bubbling up nicely. I can actually remove that lid. Oh, it smells so good. All those herbs and spices in there. Awesome. We'll just turn that down, let that simmer, and it'll be ready here very shortly. So I'm not going to stir this until everything's in the pot. I could also put it in a bowl, toss it in a bowl, and then just serve it in that bowl if I wanted to. So I'm going to just kind of gently fold these two herbs together, the mint and the cilantro.
Janice wants to know, can you use basil instead?
You could. You can use anything you like. I think the flavor profile is up to you. What you have here is something that's like similar to pasta. So the couscous carries whatever style flavor you want to impart. So whether it's parsley or dill or whether it's basil or mint, it doesn't matter. Traditionally, they're big on mint and cilantro. And I think that works well, but feel free. You might not be able to find one herb in the supermarket, or in your yard. So you could just go with what's seasonal and fresh. So I've got that there. Now I just need to gently fold all of these items together with that. I don't want to smash it or smush it all up. I want to make sure we get it all incorporated. So you've got all these great flavorful vegetables. You've got the chickpeas that'll pop. You've got the spices. You've got that fresh mint.
What about garbanzo beans? Priscilla wants to know.
What about them? I'm sorry.
Can you use garbanzo beans?
Yeah, chickpeas and garbanzo beans, I believe, are basically the same thing. I'm sorry, I just took the recipe away. Alice is typing it. Sorry. I know I had it in there, but I don't know what happened. All right. So look how colorful and beautiful that is. I mean, you've got all of those different colors coming together. That looks healthy, I think. We've only got a little bit of olive oil in there, and you could, like I said earlier, omit that if you wanted to. Got all those vegetables, nothing sweet, but they got some carbohydrates, of course. But I'm going to put a little bit here in the center. And if, like I said, if I had this left over from dinner or something where I served it hot, I could easily serve it tomorrow chilled with my favorite vinaigrette dressing to kind of spruce it up a little bit. But tonight, to give it that acidity, I'm going to hit it with a little bit of the lemon. It's already got some citrus in there with the zest, but we want some juice. If you wanted to put a wedge on the side, certainly can do that. And then we can turn to our chicken, which should be done now. And hopefully you can see the beautiful color that's imparted from starting with the browning and then moving into the chicken stock, and then that spice blend that we put in there adds a little bit of color. You can tell that the sauce is thickened, and that's the thickening that took place from us utilizing that little bit of flour that we put in the beginning, or before the liquid, just before the liquid. I can add the chicken to the plate. And like I said, if you wanted legs and you wanted bone in, it doesn't matter. Whatever works for you would be good. You could probably even utilize this recipe with pork. Doesn't seem to be too popular with folks on AARP, but beef ribs, if you wanted to do ribs, lots of different things. So probably not seafood because this is pretty spicy, like dominant in terms of flavor profile. So that might not work, but certainly would work good for chicken or any type of poultry and beef or pork. Are there any other questions at the moment?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, and I'm just gonna put some vegetables down. And I'm looking at this like, oh, I want a few little red potatoes in here. That would be, you know, I mean, I grew up in Idaho, so that's sort of the style that I'm used to. The olives sort of look like little potatoes, but they make those nice, really small ones today that would cook about the same amount of time as these carrots cook. And then we've got.
This is Jackie. I have a question. So you did this as a stovetop, and I think when I posted it as a slow cooker. Would there be a noticeable difference when you use chicken, which is pretty moist anyway? Does it matter whether you use a slow cooker or a stovetop in this recipe, or is it going to get the same effect?
I would say if you can use and have a slow cooker, the more you use that, the better. This isn't one of the dishes that is like an Instant Pot style pressure cooker. It would cook it, but the longer and the lower and the slower it goes, then the more flavor you're going to get in the chicken. So you could do
And
it.
would you wait to put your vegetables in then until partway through the process?
It's not necessary, I don't think. It's like, let me take a look here at these veggies. Because we only have like the 40 minutes, these are already cooked. And that's the primary reason that we took out the chicken. But most of your pot roasts and your stews and things, your vegetables just get cooked to death. So ideally, this would be the perfect texture. It's slightly al dente, but it's cooked all the way through. So it's kind of up to you. It just depends. My grandma and my mom, when they cooked, they cooked everything like a long time, and everything was tender. So your olives are not going to break down. Your carrots will hold their shape, but they can still be mush. But that's a great question because, I mean, that's the hard part, I think, as we mentioned last week when we were doing the AARP national show. How do you get the chicken cooked to perfection? The sauce has imparted its flavor. The veggies are cooked perfectly, but they're not overcooked. You know, that's the hard part. If you're going slow cooker, everything goes in, turn it on low, cook it overnight, and then everything tends to get a little softer. So it really matters on, depends on how much time you have and how much you want to invest into the cooking of the dish. So this should be perfect in terms of the chicken. Although I rushed it a little bit, I would have rather gone slower, because if you rush it too much, you can make the chicken kind of dry, especially if you're using breast. But at least we got it.
It looks so good. My mouth is watering. I'll say that for it.
Well, Peggy says it looks so good. She might cook it this for tomorrow. Thanks, Chef.
You're welcome. Yeah, and the flavor of the sauce is really nice. If you find when you're done dishing it up, or however you plan to serve it, even if you're going to serve it in the pot, but the sauce isn't, this could reduce a lot more. But remember, if you're using the reduction method to thicken your sauce, which means you're just evaporating moisture, it's going to concentrate the flavors. So if you have the right amount of salt for a quart of sauce and you reduce it to a half a quart, you might be too salty. So you have to keep that in mind. So what you can do then is just come back with a little thickening agent, cornstarch slurry or flour slurry, and thicken that quart of sauce, which is perfect, and do that separately. So it's kind of up to you. I would say this is a little on the thin side. So I'll probably thicken it after the show before we dish all of this stuff up. But it looks great. You can see that dark, rich color. It makes me want to travel again. Let's go to Morocco.
I do have a couple of questions. From Lynette, can tofu or tempeh be substituted for chicken?
Absolutely. Any of those proteins that you want to use would be a perfect substitution. So I would go with the firmer. Anytime we do dishes like this and we use tofu, we try to use the firm or the extra firm, because if you were to try this with soft, I would probably fall apart. But what you could do, because soft tofu, I like to use it. I like the texture of it actually. You don't add the tofu to this. You make this separate vegetarian, and then you put a nice, beautiful, soft block of maybe even chilled tofu on a plate with this beautiful, hot, spicy Moroccan vegetable blend over the top of it. And then you get a contrast in flavor and texture and temperature. So actually that sounds really good.
Great, because we had a couple of viewers that said it looks like a soup served in a, you can serve it in a bowl, couscous on the side, but someone was wanting to know what would you do with the leftover sauce, and you gave a good idea.
Yeah, this is really more of a stew than anything, depending on how you reduce it. And couscous more often than not is sort of served with the stew or that type of thing that's oftentimes just spooned on top. So served on the side in a bowl, and then you spoon it on top as you eat the stew. So there's no wrong way to do it, but hopefully you can see the beautiful colors in that couscous. The chicken's got the earth tones and stuff going on. Couldn't hurt to come back with some fresh cilantro or some fresh mint or parsley or whatever you like. Basil, if you want to use basil, Janice, go for it. Any of those things would be great. So.
You know, Carla, she said, I normally saute onions before putting them in crock pot. With this recipe, no need.
Yep, no need. No, we try to do it all in one pot. I mean, there is that extra step of taking the chicken out. And that's because we're doing kind of a large batch. If you have a pot this size and you're only doing 2 pieces of chicken, you can almost do that at the same time. So you could have the carrots, the chicken, the onions cooking with with each other in there because you'd have enough room. But you notice when we filled it, the whole bottom was covered. We had 8 pieces of chicken in there because I had a large whole chicken. So
One last question. The chef, I guess Karen wanted to know if you use a rocker kitchen knife.
The rocker kitchen knife?
Yeah, to chop.
As in like a rock and roll rocker kind of?
I know,
No, this is just a regular traditional French knife or kitchen knife. And they all have this curve in the blade. It's designed for rocking. So that's what we say when we teach students and folks to chop. You'll always want a bit of a curve in the blade if you're going to be doing chopping. So that's sort of that rocking motion. You wouldn't get that from like a sashimi knife or a santoku style knife. If you're doing chopping that requires the back and forth, you want a little bit of a dip. So there may be a knife called the rocker knife. I'm not sure, but if it is, or if there is, then that's probably what they're talking about.
We're going to be taking a little survey, Jackie.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks to all of you who tuned in last week to Friday's AARP national event. That was fun. And I hope you have a great weekend.
We have a survey for you to take regarding the May cooking program. If you can just take a few minutes and make a choice of the different picks.
Everybody can pick up to 4 because we have 4 weeks in May. So pick your top 4.
Just want to thank you for Chef, the AARP Hawaii volunteers, and most importantly, you folks at home.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. May is actually going to be our last month of programming, at least for the summer, and we'll make a decision about the fall after the summer. But we do have April lined up and most of you are registered, but if not, it's on the cooking calendar. So we're just looking at May, and it looks like 110 people have voted so far. And most popular is Thai curry, followed by meat June, followed by Indian chicken tikka masala and the mother sauces. So leave that up and give people a few more minutes to take the poll. And meanwhile, I think I see 2 more questions. Nope, just comments. Joyce said she thinks maybe she meant the bolo knife. And Amy says, thanks, Chef.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so I'm gonna end the poll because 98% of you have voted. So here, I'll show you what the results are. So it looks like We'll be making meat June, chicken tikka masala, Thai curry, and mother sauces. So thank you everybody for voting on that. And thank you, Chef Dan, for being willing to make whatever we want to learn.
Whatever.
Thanks everyone. I believe that concludes our program for the day.
Mahalo.